The sun was shining in London on this special morning. Hundreds of people lined the streets near Westminster Abbey. Some had been there since very early, waiting in the cold with blankets and hot drinks. They all wanted to see the same thing, the royal family. "I've been here since 5 in the morning," said an older woman with a small British flag in her hand. "I wouldn't miss seeing them for anything in the world." The big old church of Westminster Abbey stood tall against the blue sky. Police officers walked around, making sure everything was safe. News people set up their cameras and microphones. Everyone was waiting. Inside Kensington Palace, far from the crowds, Prince William looked at his watch. It was almost time to leave. He wore a dark blue suit that had been carefully pressed. In another room, Kate was helping their 3 children get ready. "Mommy, is my hair okay?" asked Princess Charlotte, who was 7 years old. She wore a pretty blue dress that matched her father's suit. "You look perfect," Kate told her with a smile. Kate herself wore a long coat dress in a soft purple color. Her hair was pulled back in a neat style with a small hat on top. 9-year-old Prince George was the oldest child. He stood very straight and tall like his father taught him. He knew that one day he would be king, so he was learning how to act at big events like this one. But 4-year-old Prince Louis was having the most fun. He ran around the room, making his parents laugh. "Louis, remember what we talked about?" William said in a kind voice. "Today we need to be on our best behavior." Louis nodded but then made a silly face that made everyone laugh again. A palace worker knocked on the door. "Your Royal Highnesses, the cars are ready," she said. Kate checked all 3 children one last time. She fixed George's tie, straightened Charlotte's headband, and made sure Louis's shoes were tied tight. "Remember, there will be many people watching," Kate said to the children. "Just smile and wave like we practiced." The family walked through the long hallways of Kensington Palace. The children's shoes made soft sounds on the floor. Outside, 3 shiny black cars waited for them. In the first car, William and Kate sat with Prince George. The second car carried Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis with their nanny. The third car had security people who would keep the family safe. As the cars drove through London, people on the streets pointed and waved. Inside the car, William held Kate's hand. "The children have been practicing so hard for today," Kate said. "I hope everything goes well." William smiled at her. "They'll be wonderful. They always are." George looked out the window at all the people. "There are so many of them," he said quietly. "They're all here to see the Commonwealth Day service," William explained. "It's a very important day where we celebrate all the countries that work together as friends." The cars got closer to Westminster Abbey. The crowd noise grew louder. Police officers moved people back to make a path for the royal cars. Inside the second car, Charlotte was telling Louis a story to keep him calm. "And then the prince saved the kingdom," she was saying as Louis listened with big eyes. The first car stopped in front of the Abbey. Photographers pushed forward, their cameras ready. The car door opened, and a palace worker stepped forward to help. Prince William stepped out first. He buttoned his suit jacket and turned to help Kate from the car. When she stepped out, the crowd cheered loudly. Her purple coat dress sparkled a little in the sunlight. Then came Prince George, looking serious and grown-up. He stood next to his father and waited for his brother and sister. The second car arrived. Princess Charlotte stepped out, giving a small wave that she had practiced many times. The crowd made happy sounds when they saw her. Finally, little Prince Louis jumped out, his eyes wide with excitement. He looked up at the huge church building and pointed. "Look how big it is," he said in a loud voice that made people nearby laugh. The royal family stood together on the steps of Westminster Abbey. Cameras flashed all around them. Today was going to be a very special day indeed. The big wooden doors of Westminster Abbey stood open wide. The royal family paused at the top of the steps. Hundreds of cameras flashed, making the moment seem even more special. "Ready?" William asked his family quietly. Kate nodded and gave his hand a small squeeze. The children stood straight, just as they had practiced at home. A man in a black suit and white collar came to welcome them. This was the Dean of Westminster, the person in charge of the church. He bowed slightly to William and Kate. "Your Royal Highnesses, welcome to Westminster Abbey," the Dean said with a warm smile. Prince George made a small bow, just as his father had taught him. Princess Charlotte did a perfect little curtsy, her dress spreading out around her. Little Louis tried to copy his brother, but almost lost his balance. Kate quickly put her hand on his shoulder to steady him. The Dean led the family into the Abbey. As they walked through the doors, the sound outside became quiet. Inside, it was cool and peaceful. The ceiling was very high, so high that Louis had to bend his head all the way back to see it. "Wow," Louis whispered loudly. His voice echoed in the big space. "Sheh," Charlotte reminded him, putting her finger to her lips. The Abbey was filled with important people. Government leaders, church officials, and representatives from many countries all stood as the royal family entered. They walked down the long center aisle on a red carpet. Every step they took echoed in the quiet church. Kate held Louis's hand tightly. She knew he might get excited and run off. Charlotte walked perfectly, keeping her eyes forward just like she had been taught. George walked next to his father, trying to match William's long steps. An older woman with white hair and a bright blue coat was already seated in the front row. She smiled when she saw the children. This was their great-aunt, Princess Anne. Next to her sat other members of the royal family. As William and Kate approached with the children, everyone bowed or curtsied. The family took their seats in the front row. The seats were old wooden chairs with red cushions. Louis bounced a little on his cushion, testing how soft it was. "Louis," Kate whispered with a small smile. The Abbey was beautiful inside. Colored light came through tall windows with pictures made of glass. The light made patterns on the stone floor. Above them, stone angels and kings had been carved hundreds of years ago. A choir of children and men in red and white robes stood ready to sing. When they began, their voices filled the huge space. Louis's mouth opened wide in surprise at the beautiful sound. The service began with everyone standing to sing. Kate helped Louis find the right page in the program. He didn't know how to read all the words, but he tried to sing along anyway. His small voice joined with hundreds of others. George stood tall like his father, singing the words he knew. Charlotte sang perfectly. She had been practicing these songs at school. After the singing, everyone sat down. A man in colorful robes walked to the front and began to speak. He talked about how important it was for countries to work together and help each other. Louis started to swing his legs under his chair. The chair was so big that his feet didn't touch the floor. Kate gently placed her hand on his knee to remind him to sit still. William glanced at his watch. The service would last for an hour, which was a long time for young children to sit quietly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small mint candy. He passed it to Kate, who slipped it to Louis. The little prince's face lit up. He put the mint in his mouth and sat a little straighter, trying to be good. People in the rows behind them watched the royal children with smiles. Everyone knew how hard it was for young children to be quiet in such a big, serious place. Charlotte noticed someone important looking at her. It was the Prime Minister, sitting a few rows back. She gave a small, polite smile, just as she had been taught. George was listening carefully to the man speaking. He knew that one day he would have important jobs like this too. He tried to understand the big words being used. Outside, the crowds were still waiting. They hoped to see the family again when the service was over. Police officers walked around, making sure everyone was safe. Inside the cool stone walls of Westminster Abbey, the service continued. The royal family sat together, doing their best to represent their country with dignity and grace, even the youngest members. As the service went on, more important people stood up to speak. Each person talked about peace and working together. Prince Louis started to get fidgety. Sitting still for so long was hard for a 4-year-old boy. Kate reached into her small purse and took out a tiny notebook and pencil. She handed them to Louis, who smiled big. Now he could draw quietly while the talking continued. Louis began to draw what looked like the inside of the church. Charlotte leaned over to see what her little brother was drawing. She whispered something in his ear that made him smile. Then she sat back up straight, being the perfect princess that everyone expected. George was watching everything carefully. He noticed how his father sat, back straight, hands folded in his lap, and tried to copy him. William gave his son a quick smile, proud of how well he was doing. The choir began to sing again. Their voices rose up to the high ceiling of the abbey. The music seemed to make the old stone walls come alive with sound. Even Louis stopped drawing to listen. A row of people carrying colorful flags walked slowly down the center aisle. Each flag belonged to a different country in the Commonwealth. There were flags in blue, red, green, yellow, all the colors you could think of. "Look at all the flags," Louis whispered a bit too loudly. An old lady sitting nearby smiled at him. Louis gave her a big smile back, showing the gap where he had lost a tooth. The flags lined up at the front of the church. It was a beautiful sight. 54 different flags all standing together. Charlotte counted them silently, moving her lips as she did the numbers in her head. Now it was time for a special part of the service. 4 children from different countries walked forward. Each child carried a small bowl of water. They poured the water into one big glass bowl at the front of the church. "The water is from rivers in their home countries," William explained quietly to George. "It shows how we are all connected." George nodded, understanding this important lesson about being a future king. Charlotte listened carefully too. Even Louis watched with interest, his drawing forgotten for a moment. Kate looked at her 3 children with pride. They were doing so well in such a big formal event. She caught William's eye, and they shared a quick smile. The service was almost halfway done now. Louis started to swing his legs again. This time, Charlotte gently put her hand on his knee, just like she had seen her mother do. Louis stopped right away. He wanted to be good like his big sister. A new person walked to the front to speak. This was a famous singer who had grown up in one of the Commonwealth countries. She began to sing without any music. Her voice was so beautiful that everyone in the church sat very still to listen. Louis's mouth opened in surprise. He had never heard someone sing like that before. Charlotte's eyes were wide too. George tried to look grown up, but even he was amazed by the singer's voice. When the song ended, the church was quiet for a moment. Then everyone clapped. The singer bowed to the royal family before going back to her seat. Now there was a reading from an old book. The words were difficult to understand, even for the adults. Louis went back to his drawing. This time he was making a picture of his family. Stick figures with crowns on their heads. Outside, the sun had gone behind some clouds. Inside the abbey, lights had been turned on, making the colored glass windows look even more beautiful. The windows told stories from long ago. A small bird had somehow found its way into the church. It flew high above everyone's heads, near the ceiling. Louis pointed up excitedly. "Bird," he said, louder than he meant to. Several people looked up. Some smiled at the little prince's excitement. Kate gently put her finger to her lips, but she was smiling too. Louis covered his mouth with his hands, his eyes still following the bird. The bird flew around for a few minutes, then found its way out through a high window. Louis looked disappointed that his little friend was gone. The service continued with more speeches and prayers. William checked his watch again. They were about halfway through now. Kate caught his eye and gave him a small nod. The children were doing well, but there was still a lot of sitting quietly ahead. Just then, a group of dancers in bright clothes came to the front of the church. This was something new and exciting. The children all sat up straighter, ready to watch the show. The dancers moved to the center of the abbey. They wore bright clothes in red, yellow, and blue. Drums began to play a happy beat that echoed through the big church. This was very different from the quiet talking and singing before. Louis clapped his hands with excitement. This time, Kate didn't stop him. Many other people were clapping too. The dancers twirled and jumped, telling a story with their movements. "They're telling the story of their country," Charlotte whispered to Louis. She had learned about these dances in school. Louis watched with his mouth open. The dancers moved so fast. One dancer did a high jump that made everyone gasp. George tried to look calm like his father, but his eyes were wide with amazement. William leaned over to Kate. "The children are loving this," he said quietly. Kate nodded. "A nice break from all the sitting," she whispered back. The dance ended with all the dancers bowing to the royal family. Louis waved at them happily. One dancer smiled and gave a small wave back, which made Louis giggle. After the dancers left, it was time for more prayers. Everyone had to stand up again. Louis groaned a little, but he stood up with his family. Standing still was almost harder than sitting still for him. The sun came out again outside, sending colorful light through the big windows. A beam of blue light fell right on Charlotte, making her look like she was glowing. People nearby noticed and smiled at the pretty sight. The prayer was long. Louis started to rock from side to side. William put his hand gently on his son's shoulder to help him stand still. Louis leaned against his father's leg, getting tired now. When everyone sat down again, Louis yawned. It had been a long morning already. Kate checked her watch. There was still about 20 minutes left of the service. Charlotte was sitting perfectly, her hands folded in her lap, just like Kate's. She noticed some teenage girls a few rows back looking at her. They were whispering and smiling. Charlotte gave them a small royal wave that she had practiced many times. The girls looked thrilled. George was watching the Archbishop, who was now talking about helping people in need. George listened carefully. His teachers had told him that a good king needs to care about all people. He wanted to remember what the Archbishop was saying. Louis's drawing was now finished. He tugged on Kate's sleeve and showed it to her. Kate smiled wide when she saw it. Louis had drawn their family standing in front of what looked like Westminster Abbey. The building was wobbly, and the people were stick figures, but it was clear who everyone was. Kate showed the drawing to William, who smiled proudly. Then she carefully put the drawing in her purse to keep it safe. A group of trumpet players stood up in the balcony of the church. When they began to play, the sound was so loud that Louis jumped in surprise. The trumpet song was happy and made people sit up straighter. As the trumpets played, important people walked down from the front of the church. They carried special objects: a golden cross, old books, and tall candles. They walked slowly and carefully. One man carrying a heavy gold stick winked at Louis as he passed by. Louis's eyes got big, and he tugged on Charlotte's sleeve to tell her what he saw. Charlotte smiled but put her finger to her lips to remind him to be quiet. Now it was almost time for the royal family to leave. They would be the last to go, after everyone else. Kate helped the children gather their things. She straightened George's tie and fixed Charlotte's headband. William bent down to whisper something to Louis, probably reminding him how to walk out properly. Outside, the crowd was getting excited again. They knew the service was ending soon. People pushed closer to the barriers, hoping to see the royal family come out. Police officers reminded everyone to stay behind the lines. Back inside, music began to play. This was the sign that the service was ending. Everyone stood up one last time. Louis stood on his tiptoes, trying to see what was happening at the front. The Archbishop came to the royal family. He spoke quietly to William and Kate, saying something that made them smile. Then he turned to the children. "You have been very good today," he told them, his voice kind and warm. Louis beamed with pride. Charlotte did another perfect curtsy. George bowed his head politely. It was finally time to leave. The royal family would walk out first, followed by all the other important people. Kate took Louis's hand. Charlotte and George stood ready behind their parents. The big doors of Westminster Abbey opened again. Outside, cameras were ready and the crowd was waiting. The royal family prepared to step back into the sunshine, and faced the thousands of people waiting to see them. The big wooden doors of Westminster Abbey opened wide. Bright sunshine poured in, making a golden path on the stone floor. The royal family stood at the top of the steps, looking out at the huge crowd. People cheered and waved flags when they saw William, Kate, and the children. "Wave to the people," Kate reminded the children softly. George, Charlotte, and Louis all waved. Louis waved with both hands, making people laugh and cheer even louder. Cameras flashed everywhere, taking hundreds of pictures that would be in newspapers all over the world tomorrow. William and Kate began to walk down the steps. The children followed, being careful not to trip. Charlotte held her dress up slightly, just as she had been taught. George walked straight and tall like his father. Louis bounced a little with each step, still full of energy despite the long service. At the bottom of the steps, a little girl with a pink dress was waiting. She held a big bunch of flowers. Palace workers had checked the flowers earlier to make sure they were safe. The little girl looked nervous as the royal family approached. "Hello there," Kate said kindly to the girl. The little girl did a small curtsy that she had clearly practiced many times. "These are for you, Your Royal Highness," she said in a shaky voice. "Thank you very much," Kate said, taking the flowers. "They're beautiful." Louis peered at the flowers with interest. "I like the purple ones," he said to the little girl. The little girl smiled, her nervousness gone. Charlotte gave her a friendly smile too. George nodded politely. More children came forward with gifts. An older boy gave William a program from the service, signed by all the important people inside. A girl with long braided hair gave Charlotte a small pin in the shape of a crown. George received a book about kings and queens of England. Louis was given a small toy soldier in a red uniform. "What do you say?" William reminded the children. "Thank you," they all said together. The crowd pressed forward, trying to get closer. Police officers kept everyone behind barriers. Many people held up phones and cameras, trying to get pictures of the royal children. A woman called out, "Charlotte, we love your dress." Charlotte gave a little twirl that made people cheer. The royal family moved toward their waiting cars. William kept his hand on George's shoulder. Kate held Louis's hand tightly so he wouldn't run off. But before they reached the cars, William stopped to speak with some people in the crowd. Louis used this chance to bend down and look at a small yellow flower growing between some stones. Charlotte joined him, carefully kneeling without getting her dress dirty. "It's a dandelion," Charlotte told her little brother. "If you blow on it, you can make a wish." Louis looked at her with big eyes. "Really?" Charlotte nodded. Louis took a big breath and was about to blow on the flower when Kate called them. "Children, it's time to go," she said. Louis looked disappointed, but Charlotte whispered, "We can find another one at home." As they walked to the car, a gust of wind blew Kate's hat. She caught it quickly, making the crowd laugh. Louis thought this was very funny and started pretending the wind was blowing him too. He leaned sideways, making everyone around them smile. William helped George into the first car. Kate guided Charlotte toward the same car. But Louis stopped suddenly, turning back to look at Westminster Abbey one more time. "Goodbye, big church," he said loudly, waving at the building. People in the crowd made awe sounds. This cute moment would be talked about on TV shows later. Kate smiled and gently led Louis to the car. As the car doors closed, the children waved through the windows. The dark glass made it harder to see them, but people still waved back enthusiastically. Inside the car, the family relaxed. The formal part of their day was over. "You were all wonderful," William told the children. "Even me?" Louis asked. He knew he had been wiggly during the service. "Especially you," William said, ruffling his son's hair. Kate took off her hat and put it on the seat. "Is everyone hungry? We'll have lunch when we get home." "I'm starving," George said. "Me too," added Charlotte. Louis nodded in agreement, patting his stomach to show how hungry he was. As the cars pulled away from Westminster Abbey, people continued to wave and take pictures. The royal family had once again shown that they were both extraordinary and ordinary at the same time. They were kings and queens, princes and princesses, but they were also a family with children who got hungry and tired and excited just like everyone else. In the car, Louis looked at his toy soldier with interest. Charlotte leaned against her mother, a little tired from being so well-behaved all morning. George asked his father a question about something the Archbishop had said. The cars drove through London streets, heading back to Kensington Palace. The children were already talking about what they would do for the rest of the day. The formal ceremony was over, but family life continued. The royal cars drove through London streets. People on the sidewalks stopped to watch them pass. Inside the first car, William and Kate sat with George and Charlotte. Louis rode in the second car with his nanny. "Did you enjoy the service?" William asked the children. "I liked the dancers best," Charlotte said. "And the flags." "I thought the trumpets were good," George added. "They were really loud." Kate smiled at their answers. "You both did very well today. Sitting still for that long is hard work." In the second car, Louis was telling his nanny all about the bird that had flown into the abbey. His hands moved up and down, showing how the bird had flapped its wings. The nanny listened with a smile, nodding at all the right moments. Back at Kensington Palace, the cars drove through the gates away from public eyes. The palace was huge and old, with beautiful gardens all around it. It looked like a place from a fairy tale, but to the children, it was simply home. The cars stopped at a private entrance. Palace workers opened the doors for the royal family. Louis jumped out first, happy to be able to run around again after sitting still for so long. "Careful with your new toy," Kate called as Louis ran with his soldier toward the door. Inside, the palace was grand but comfortable. The public never saw these private rooms where the family really lived. There were toys neatly put away on shelves, family photos on tables, and comfy couches where they could relax. Louis headed straight for a big box of toys in the corner. He wanted to introduce his new toy soldier to his other toys. Charlotte went to find her favorite doll to show her the new pin she had received. "I'm going to change into comfortable clothes," George told his parents. He was happy to take off his formal suit. "Good idea," William agreed. "Then we'll have lunch." The family split up to change out of their formal clothes. Kate helped Louis, who still needed help with buttons and zippers. She changed from her purple coat dress into simple pants and a sweater. William put on jeans and a casual shirt. George chose comfortable pants and his favorite blue sweater. Charlotte picked out a pink dress that was much easier to play in than her formal church dress. In the dining room, palace workers had set out lunch. There was chicken, vegetables, bread, and fruit. It was simple food that the children would eat, not fancy royal dishes. "Wash your hands first," Kate reminded everyone. After they washed their hands, the family sat down together. William put food on the children's plates while Kate poured drinks. It looked like any normal family having lunch together, except for the beautiful old dining room and the palace workers standing quietly nearby. "I'm so hungry," Louis said, biting into a piece of chicken. "That's because you were so good during the service," Kate told him. "Being good is hard work." Louis smiled with his mouth full. He was proud of himself for being good, even though it had been difficult. "Did you see the Prime Minister looking at us?" Charlotte asked as she carefully cut her food. "Yes," William said. "He told me later that you were all very impressive." "Even Louis?" George asked with a small smile. "Especially Louis," William said. "Everyone expects you and Charlotte to be well-behaved because you're older." But Louis surprised them. Louis sat up straighter, proud to be praised. As they ate, they talked about what they had seen at Westminster Abbey. George had questions about the Archbishop's speech. Charlotte wanted to know more about the dancers and where they were from. Louis mostly talked about the bird and the flowers he had seen. After lunch, the children were allowed to play. Louis and Charlotte went to the playroom together. George asked if he could read his new book about kings and queens. Of course, Kate said. But remember, we have another event this afternoon. George nodded. There was always another event, another place to be, another time when they had to be on their best behavior. It was part of being royal. William sat down with a cup of tea. They really were wonderful today, he said to Kate. I was proud of all of them. Kate agreed. Louis is getting better at the public events, and Charlotte is such a natural. George is taking it all so seriously, William added. Sometimes I worry that he feels too much responsibility already. Kate put her hand on William's. He's just like you were, she said softly. Outside the palace, people were still talking about the royal family's appearance at Westminster Abbey. Photos were already online showing Louis waving wildly, Charlotte doing her perfect curtsy, and George standing tall next to his father. But inside the palace walls, they were just a family having lunch, changing into comfortable clothes, and playing with their toys. The balance between public duty and private family life was something they worked on every day. After lunch, the royal family had a few hours before their next event. They would have to go to a children's hospital later that afternoon. But for now, they had some free time, something that was rare in their busy schedule. Louis ran into the garden as soon as he finished eating. The palace gardens were huge, with green grass, tall trees, and colorful flowers. There was plenty of space for a little boy to run and play. Charlotte followed him outside, carrying her doll. Don't get too dirty, Kate called after them. We have to go out again later. George stayed inside with his new book. He sat in a big chair by the window where the light was good for reading. The book had pictures of kings and queens from long ago, wearing crowns and fancy clothes. George looked at each picture carefully, knowing that someday his picture would be in a book like this. William went to his office to make some phone calls. Even on busy days like this, there was always work to do. Kate used this time to check on the children's schedules for the next week. Outside in the garden, Louis had found a dandelion just like the one he had seen near Westminster Abbey. Look, he called to Charlotte. It's the wishing flower. Charlotte came over. Remember what I told you. You have to blow on it and make a wish. Louis took a big breath and blew as hard as he could. The tiny white seeds of the dandelion flew away in the wind, floating like little parachutes across the garden. Louis watched them with wide eyes. What did you wish for? Charlotte asked. I can't tell you, Louis said, or it won't come true. Charlotte nodded. She knew this rule about wishes. They played in the garden for a while. Louis pretended to be a knight with his new toy soldier. Charlotte made a small bed of leaves for her doll. They were just like any other children playing, except their playground was a royal palace garden. Inside, Kate came to sit with George. How's your book? She asked. It's interesting, George said. Did you know that Queen Victoria was only 18 when she became queen? Yes, that's very young, isn't it? Kate said. How do you think you would feel if you became king at 18? George thought about this. Scared, I think. But I'd try to be brave. Kate put her arm around him. You have many years before you need to think about that. And Dad and I will make sure you're ready. George nodded, feeling better. He went back to his book, turning the pages slowly. After an hour of play, it was time to start getting ready for the hospital visit. The children came inside. Louis's pants were a little dirty from playing in the garden. Charlotte's hair had come loose from its neat style. Time to clean up, Kate told them. Louis, you need to change your pants. Charlotte, let's fix your hair. Palace workers helped get the children ready. One woman brushed Charlotte's hair back into its neat style. Another helped Louis find clean pants. George closed his book and went to wash his hands and face. William came back from his office. How was everyone's break? He asked. I made a wish on a dandelion, Louis told him. I read about Queen Victoria, George said. My doll had a picnic in the garden, Charlotte added. William smiled at their answers. Sounds like a good use of time. Now we need to talk about the hospital visit. The family sat down in the living room. William explained what would happen at the hospital. They would meet sick children and their families. They would give out small gifts and talk to the doctors and nurses. The children at the hospital might be sad or not feeling well, Kate explained. So we need to be extra kind and gentle. Can I show them my toy soldier? Louis asked. That's a lovely idea, Kate said. It might make them happy to see your toy. I can tell them about the dancers we saw today, Charlotte suggested. Perfect, William said. George, what will you talk to them about? George thought for a moment. I could tell them about the bird that flew into the abbey. That was funny. William nodded. They would like that story. A palace worker came into the room. The cards will be ready in 20 minutes, Your Royal Highnesses, she said. Thank you, William replied. We'll be ready. Kate helped the children with final touches. She straightened George's collar, fixed a button on Charlotte's cardigan, and made sure Louis's shoes were tied properly. Remember, she told them, today is about making other people happy. Sometimes that's the most important part of being royal. The children nodded. Even Louis understood that their job was special. They got to help people feel better just by visiting and talking to them. Ready for round 2? William asked his family with a smile. The children stood up straight and nodded. Their break was over. It was time to be royal again. The royal cars pulled up in front of the children's hospital. It was a big modern building with colorful pictures on the outside walls. A crowd had gathered, hoping to see the royal family. Security guards kept everyone behind barriers, making a path for William, Kate, and their children to walk through. The hospital director waited at the entrance. She was a tall woman with gray hair and a kind smile. Next to her stood several doctors in white coats and nurses in blue uniforms. As the royal family stepped out of their cars, people cheered and took pictures. The children stayed close to their parents. This was their second public event of the day, and they knew what to do now. Welcome to Royal Children's Hospital, Your Royal Highnesses, the director said, bowing slightly. Thank you for having us, William replied. We're looking forward to meeting everyone. The family followed the director into the hospital. Inside, the walls were painted with animals, stars, and rainbows. It was meant to be a happy place despite being a hospital. We'll visit the playroom first, the director explained. Children who feel well enough have gathered there to meet you. The family walked down a bright hallway. Hospital staff stopped their work to watch them pass. Many smiled and nodded respectfully. In the playroom, about 15 children waited with their parents. Some children sat in wheelchairs. Others wore pajamas and hospital bracelets. A few had no hair because of their treatments. But when they saw the royal family, all the children smiled. Everyone, please welcome the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and their children, the director announced. The room filled with clapping. The royal children looked a bit shy now that all eyes were on them. Kate gently nudged them forward. William and Kate began talking to the sick children and their parents. They moved around the room, making sure to speak to everyone. George, Charlotte, and Louis followed their parents at first, watching how they talked to people. A little boy in a wheelchair caught Louis's eye. The boy looked about the same age as Louis, but he had tubes connected to his arms. Louis walked over to him, with Kate watching carefully nearby. Hello, Louis said. I'm Louis. I'm Sam, the boy replied. I saw you on TV today. Louis smiled. I was at a big church. I saw a bird fly inside. Sam's eyes got wide. Really? What happened to it? It flew around and then went out a window, Louis told him. It was funny. Sam laughed. Louis took out his toy soldier and showed it to Sam. Soon the two boys were playing together, forgetting all about being a prince or being sick. Across the room, Charlotte sat with a group of girls. She was telling them about the dancers at Westminster Abbey. The girls listened with interest, asking questions about the colorful clothes and the music. Did you get to dance too? One girl asked. No, Charlotte said. We had to sit still. But I'm learning ballet at school. "Can you show us something?" another girl asked. Charlotte looked at Kate, who nodded with encouragement. Charlotte stood up and did a small twirl and curtsy. The girls clapped, delighted by the private ballet show from a princess. George was talking to an older boy who had books on his bed. They were discussing history, which George knew a lot about from his lessons. "I want to be a historian when I grow up," the boy told George. "What do you want to be?" George paused, not sure how to answer. He would be king someday, but that wasn't exactly a choice. "I think I'd want to help people," he said finally, "like my dad does." The boy nodded, thinking this was a good answer. William and Kate moved around the room, talking to parents about their children's illnesses and treatments. They asked thoughtful questions and listened carefully to the answers. Sometimes Kate would hold a mother's hand when the story was sad. William would put his hand on a father's shoulder to show support. Palace workers handed out gift bags to all the children. Inside were toys, books, and a card signed by the royal family. The sick children were thrilled with their gifts, showing them to each other excitedly. A small girl with no hair gave Charlotte a drawing she had made. It showed a princess in a castle. Charlotte thanked her and carefully folded the drawing to take home. Time passed quickly in the playroom. The children who had been shy at first were now laughing and talking with the royal family. Louis was on the floor playing with cars with several boys. Charlotte was helping a girl do a puzzle. George was showing a group of children something in his book about kings and queens. William looked at Kate with a smile. Their children were doing perfectly. They weren't just following royal duty. They were connecting with these sick children in a real way. "We have one more stop," the director said quietly to William. "There are some children too ill to come to the playroom." William nodded. It was time for the hardest part of their visit.